The United States is lying about weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons, but this time it's about Iran because they want a war with Iran so badly they can taste it. So this week, Iran's new president and the Supreme Ayatollah said they both would talk to the U.S. about a new nuclear agreement if the United States agrees to lift sanctions. But the U.S. won't do it. They want to instead accuse Iran of having nuclear weapons, but they have neither been able to prove it, not through all the sanctions that we put on them to hurt their economy during the Obama years. We never proved it, but we just don't want to discuss it either. We want to say, no, they have nuclear weapons. We're not even going to talk to them. Basically, they just want to talk shit. Pardon my language, but that's what they want to do. Here's the headline, says Biden administration throws cold water on the prospect of renewed nuclear talks. Even talks, they won't talk. So here's what the State Department says. We will judge Iran's leadership by their actions, not their words. If Iran wants to demonstrate seriousness or a new approach, they would stop nuclear escalations and start meaningful cooperation with the IAEA. They're talking about the International Atomic Energy Agency. That is the watchdog group that inspects nuclear activity to make sure that no one is making nuclear weapons. That is total nonsense, this quote right here. They say these lies because they expect that you don't know any better. They can say that Iran doesn't work with the IAEA, but you watch Redacted and you know that they do. Here, I'm going to show you a clip from March of 2023, so barely over a year ago, where IAEA Director Rafael Grossi went to Iran to inspect the nuclear enrichment program, and he said he was pretty stinking satisfied with how Iran was working with the IAEA. Watch.
Have, for example, the enrichment activities up to 60% been in detail, technical detail, or have you been discussing this with heads of state you have been meeting regarding that it is hardly to explain an enrichment program to this extent with a non-military enrichment program? Have they been able to give you an explanation for that?
Well, in fact, they don't need to give me an explanation of why they enrich at 60%. What we need to ensure is that we have the necessary ability to inspect the activities there. They enriched at the levels that they declare. There are certain parameters, as you know, between an inspected state and the IAEA. They tell us this is what we are going to do, and then we perform the necessary inspections. So in that regard, in terms of motivations and reasons, which I believe is a little bit behind your question, we don't discuss that. For us, what is important, the only thing that matters is that we are able to inspect, that we are able to account for every gram of enriched material that is there. And this is the spirit of the exchanges, and we have been working satisfactorily in that regard. There have been other types of issues, and as you know, but they are not directly related to this particular issue.
Every gram.
So what they are saying here, so the United States says we won't talk to Iran because they're not working with the IAEA. And here I have proof of the IAEA saying we're working satisfactory with Iran. Okay, stop lying then, U.S. State Department. Does this sound familiar?
Yes.
I feel like there was a longer, either an extra clip when last time we did this, or this has been clipped down from it, but from where the guy asking the initial question kept trying to push him. Or am I thinking of something else where he kept?
This was a part of a longer.
He's like, no, you really. He kept almost trying to prompt him to make up stuff.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. We've accounted for every gram. We do our job. Let us do our job. And by the way, we've been critical of the IAEA as it's related to, its the attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant in Ukraine. Of course, they went there and they basically said, yeah, the missiles, they came from that direction, but we can't actually say that out loud.
Yes. So, okay, the United States is telling tall tales, saying that Iran is not working with the IAEA when we have it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So does this sound familiar? Well, it should, because recall how the Bush administration sold us a bill of goods about Saddam Hussein's weapons of mass destruction, which then led us to years and decades of war. Here's the real story behind that. You may recall that we had this televised congressional testimony from an alleged nurse about soldiers, Iraqi soldiers, who were throwing babies from incubators. Remember this?
Mm-hmm.
While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, took the incubators, and left the children to die on the cold floor.
She's such an amazing actress, isn't she?
Okay, that was a lie. She was 15 years old, not a nurse. She was the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador to the United States at the time. Here is what Scott Horton's great book, Enough Already, says about this. It talks about how this propaganda, I'm reading to you from the last paragraph, the last sentence of the first paragraph, because this is very shocking and I want us to collectively absorb this, to remember how we were manipulated. It says, this propaganda was made to break the American people's reluctance to go to war, their latent so-called Vietnam syndrome, and scare the Saudi king into allowing the attack to be waged from Arabian soil. So what they're saying then is that the United States, we tried to learn our lesson from Vietnam and say, we're not going to do this anymore. But they manipulated us with this lie so that we would support it, even though we didn't want to. Okay, so I'm going to give us credit for the fact that we needed to be lied to in order to support this. Now, in fact, if we go back to that screen, it says this babies from incubator story was cooked up by a New York public relations firm called Hill and Knowlton, which was run by President Bush's former chief of staff from the Reagan years, Craig Fuller. This lie was presented by the daughter of the Kuwaiti ambassador. Now, later it talks about how the Bush administration claimed that there were 250,000 Iraqi troops and 1,500 tanks lined up on the Saudi border, preparing to conquer Riyadh. And that also was a lie. In fact, the St. Petersburg Times from Florida, not a Russian press, but in fact, American press, obtained Soviet satellite photos while attempting to confirm the story. And they published it and they offered these stories to the AP, Scripps Howard, CNN, but none of them refused, none of them would run it. They wanted a war. They had exculpatory evidence and they would not run it because they were trying to manipulate us into war. And in fact, that is what happens. Now, here is another thing we were not told that, again, is super familiar, is that Saddam Hussein was willing to negotiate with the United States. And in fact, he thought, well, the United States is not going to betray me. I've been working with the CIA since at least 1963. In fact, take a look at this. The CIA helped him come to power. It says, after the successful Ba'athist coup of 1963, Hussein was brought back from exile in Egypt and quickly became the head of the secret police, relying on CIA-supplied lists of suspected communists. So the CIA helped him come into power. And in fact, for years, the Reagan government worked with Hussein, with the U.S. military and CIA providing the Iraqis with satellite information to help them better target Iranian troops in the field with mustard and nerve gases such as sarin and taboon. And tens of thousands of Iranian conscripts were killed. So this Saddam Hussein was a friend of the United States until they turned him into an enemy, in case you didn't know that.
Want to show the pictures of Donald Rumsfeld, like basically making out with him? And
yeah, I didn't choose to bring those, but that is true. So it's no wonder that Saddam would have thought, well, the U.S. will at least negotiate with me then. I will do this to save face. But that, too, was hidden from us. Now, according to Scott Horton, Iraq did have nuclear weapons, but they hid it. But it was not enough of a nuclear program. It was not finished. That we should have then been threatened by it or think that we had to go to war. And in fact, he said that the Bush administration, Bush Sr., lied that the war could not have been avoided even on America's terms, because as soon as Saddam Hussein realized the negative reaction of Americans to the invasion, Hussein started to back down and promised not to invade Saudi Arabia and offered to negotiate. Did you know this? that Saddam Hussein offered to negotiate, that's news to me. We were told war was the only option. In fact, through the second half of 1990, Hussein tried to find a face-saving way to withdraw, but the U.S. refused to even try, which is what we have today. That's happening. Even the United Nations resolution that the U.S. had supported called for future negotiations, but a few days later, the Bush administration said, absolutely not, it's war. They would not negotiate. So they had war on the brain and they would not be deterred. And this worked. We got the war we wanted with very little blowback. Millions dead in the Middle East, thousands of Americans, but no biggie, I guess, because we were never held account. And now we have the same story. So the U.S. is saying Iran has nuclear weapons and they're not complying with weapons inspection. The weapons inspectors are saying, yeah, they are. They actually are doing just that. And in fact, many times Iran has said that they are enriching uranium for their nuclear power because nuclear power is the cleanest energy we've got and has the fewest deaths per kilowatts of energy than any other energy that we've got. And they want prosperity, which comes with necessitates energy. Here's what the Ayatollah said about it this week. These are notes from their meeting with the new Iranian president, Masoud Pezeshkian, saying that yes, nuclear energy is one of the most fundamental and essential priorities for Iran's future. Now, what they're saying here, if you look at the headline, is we will when planning, we neither wait for the enemy's approval nor trust them. So who's the enemy, Clayton? Any guesses who the enemy is?
Who the enemy? Iran.
It's us.
Oh,
that's Iran saying we're not going to negotiate with the enemy.
Right.
Yeah, that's us. We are the ones who keep provoking them for war and have been for decades.
And why should they negotiate with us? I mean, like, they have every right to have these weapons if they want to defend themselves from us. I mean, all of these countries that are building nuclear weapons and stuff, they're doing that because we have them and we threaten to use them, and we're the only ones in the world that have ever used them. So why wouldn't they want to have some means to defend themselves from our invasions?
Well, think what they're offering us, though, right now. They're saying you can take a look at our nuclear program, even though we hacked it for ourselves during the Obama and Bush years. We hacked their nuclear centrifuges. We're the only ones to ever launch a cyber weapon in the world, and we did it on Iran with Israel's help. But they're saying, hey, if you want, we can come to a new disarmament deal. We'll be completely clear about our nuclear weapons if you just lift sanctions. And the United States is saying, actually, no, we can't do that. Well, why can't they do that? Because it would pump the brakes on our plans for war. That's why we see so much rhetoric about Iran has the cyber criminals. Iran is hacking Israel and our own government. Iran hacked the Trump administration. Iran tried to assassinate Trump, right? This is exactly what they want, but what they're telling us right now is Iran won't work with weapons inspectors, but they are, and we have proof of that. The only thing that this really bums me out, this story, more than most, but I like this take on it, which makes me laugh, which just prevents me from crying. This is from one of my favorite ex-users, the redheaded libertarian, is, finally, a war with Iran, because it reminds us that these neocons have wanted this for a very long time, and their evil plans are finally being hatched if we let it.
If you're listening to the audio version of this, that's a picture of John McCain in the sky.
I think that's also John McCain and John Lewis, I believe. Yeah. Clayton and I had a discussion. Can we put it back up? Do you guys think this is John Lewis, who did also want a war with Iran? I think that's the both of them. And some of the comments on here are pretty funny because they're saying there's no way that guy, especially John McCain, would be in heaven. Because he wanted war so badly. He had a whole song that he would sing about bomb Iran. He loved the idea of bombing Iran. And then you have so many, of course, members of the United States Congress, all the neocons in Congress right now, the Lindsey Grahams of the world, Mike Turner, Mike Rogers, all of these guys that want war with Iran in the worst possible way. And that's exactly what the deep state wants. I mean, they absolutely want a war with Iran. And by the way, that's what Benjamin Netanyahu wants.